If you're a short person looking for a first or second motorcycle, you've probably noticed you're being recommended the same bikes over and over again. I mean, seriously, how many times have you been told to go ride a Rebel 500? And sure, with a 27-inch seat height, that's a pretty good option. But seat height alone doesn't tell you the whole story. There's things like standover height, center of gravity, and the overall ergonomics, all contributing to how confident a short rider feels on a motorcycle. Eventually, you'll be skilled enough to ride whatever you want. Aspiring short riders always say, well, Jocelyn Snow is 5'1" and rides a BMW GS. But if you're new to riding, confidence is key. And it's hard to be confident on a bike that is working against you. So today, we're going to talk about the best motorcycles for short riders, not based on seat height alone. We'll discuss what makes a motorcycle actually easy to ride and back it up with bikes that prove it. And before you jump in the comments section, no, this is not an autobiographical video. As hard as it is to believe, I am 5'11" with a 32-inch inseam. Look at the footage, it is real. I have no idea why everyone on YouTube thinks I'm 5'4". Let's jump in. If you're gonna take away anything from this video, it is that seat height alone does not tell the whole story. What really changes your ability to reach the ground is standover height. Standover height relates to how wide the bike seat is between your legs. When you put your feet down, your legs don't just go straight down to the ground. They're bowed outward by the width of the seat. If a bike has a particularly wide seat, it's going to make it feel noticeably taller. This is where a lot of shorter riders get caught off guard. They will sit on a bike with a 29-inch seat height and then on one with a 32-inch seat height and feel surprisingly more comfortable on the taller bike while tiptoeing on the shorter one. A perfect example of a bike that accomplishes this is the Honda CRF 300 LS. This is the lowered version of Honda's proven dual sport model. Even though the seat height is still around 32 inches, it feels much more manageable because it's so narrow through the middle. The tank is slim and the seat tapers inward, and your legs drop nearly straight down without being forced outward. And on top of that, the CRF is light, sitting on the low 300-pound wet and ready to ride. Dual sports and ADV bikes are notoriously tall. They need long travel suspension to be able to tackle off-road conditions. But with bikes like this, the slightly lower seat, the narrow silhouette, and the low curb weight make it pretty manageable for short riders. Because it's not that heavy, you can lean it over to the side a little bit and get your foot down. So it's a little more nuanced than that. Now, seat height isn't the only factor that makes a motorcycle confidence-inspiring to a short rider, but it's definitely a key piece to the puzzle. When you're new to riding, slow speed maneuvers are one of the biggest obstacles. Anyone can go fast in a straight line, but the real challenge is controlling a bike with finesse in a parking lot, tight turns, or even just coming to a stoplight. During these moments, putting a foot down when you feel like you're losing balance is a common occurrence as a beginner rider. You'll gain confidence much faster if you can easily get a foot or two on the ground. If you are very vertically challenged, like barely over 5 feet tall, a motorcycle with a really low seat height is pretty much non-negotiable to get you up to speed. By super low, I'm talking about bikes with seat heights that have like 25 to 29 inches. This is one of the main reasons why the Honda Rebel 500 or the Kawasaki Eliminator 450 have become the perennial default choices. The Rebel 500 has a 27-inch seat height and more traditional cruiser ergonomics. This is one of those bikes where you feel like you're sitting within it because the seat is so low. The Eliminator sits a little higher at 29 inches, but the ergonomics are much more neutral. It fits more closely to a standard motorcycle than a super low slung cruiser. And depending on your overall proportions beyond just inseam, the Eliminator might be more or less comfortable. So while seat height isn't the whole story, it's the easiest way to immediately gain confidence. It's why a lot of people start out on bikes with a low seat height, and it's why a lot of beginner bikes just have lower seat heights in general. If you want to get on a bike, be able to put both feet down, and feel in control right away, this is where you want to look. Now, another major factor that completely changes how approachable a motorcycle feels is weight. Because even if a bike isn't super low, a lighter bike is going to be much easier to control if, and let's be real, when things go a little sideways. When you're learning, you're going to have moments where the bike leans a little too far over when you come to a stop, or you come in a bit awkward and need to catch yourself. On heavier bikes, that situation turns into full-blown panic pretty quickly. Once it starts going, you're probably not going to save it. On a lighter bike, you have much more room to recover. You can catch it, shift your weight, put a foot down, and keep things under control. If you want as much room for error as possible when starting out as a shorter rider, a mini bike like a Grom is basically starting on easy mode. The seat height is around 30 inches, so it's not that tall, but it's definitely not the lowest you will find. The real advantage is the weight. Groms weigh a little over 220 pounds. You can pretty much toss them around, catch it mid-lean, or pick it up without needing a spotter or a weight belt. There are other advantages too, like their ultra docile power output and just the general friendly nature of the bike. Of course, Groms have limitations. They top out at like 55 miles an hour. You're not going to take this thing on a cross-country road trip, but as an entry-level training tool for someone who's just curious about motorcycles and wants to eliminate as many pain points as possible, a Grom is about as good as it gets. And heck, it's why I still have one in my stable as my venerable little stunt Grom. If I ever want to teach anybody how to ride, I've got the Grom. You drop it, crash it, doesn't really matter. If you want a bike that's a little bit bigger, Honda's XR150L is a bit closer to full size, and Yamaha's MT-03 also kind of lives in that halfway point between a Grom and a full-sized motorcycle. For a short rider with little to no experience, a bike that combines a manageable seat height and a very low weight is a cheat code when you're starting out. Have you ever noticed how half of the best roads you'll ever find have absolutely zero cell service? You're in the middle of nowhere with no phone signal, maps won't load, so you have to pull out your compass and sundial to figure out how to get back home. Well, that's not going to happen to you when you use Calimoto. With the Calimoto app, you can download maps ahead of time and run full navigation offline. So even when you're deep in the mountains or in the middle of a West Texas desert, you've still got turn-by-turn navigation. Calimoto also automatically records your rides too. It tracks speed, elevation, all of it. So after the ride, you can see what you did and save it for later or share it with your buddies. That way you can revisit your routes and remember which one you want to try again in the future. If you're tired of getting lost or losing your best rides, check out Calimoto. Hit the link in the description, download the app, and use one of the codes on the website to get either a 30-day free trial or 10% off of your first year. Thanks to Calimoto for the support on today's video. Now let's get back to the show. But it's not just a motorcycle's weight that affects how easy it is to handle. It's where it carries that weight. Two bikes can weigh the exact same, have the similar seat heights, and yet feel completely different the second you take them off the kickstand. That's a result of the motorcycle's center of gravity and the overall design. If a bike carries its weight higher up, it's going to feel top-heavy. It wants to tip over more easily, and once it starts leaning, it's going to take more effort to bring it back. You can think of high-powered sport bikes in this realm. On the other hand, there's times where a bike that should be totally unrealistic for a smaller rider is surprisingly easy to handle. A great example is the Indian Scout Bobber. This motorcycle is really popular among shorter riders, particularly women, based on just my anecdotal experience. If you want a bike with more power and a more premium feel that still retains the ease of use of a low-slung cruiser, the Scout is a pretty proven platform. Not only does it have an incredibly low seat height of just 25.5 inches, it also carries its weight so low that the 550-pound curb weight feels pretty effortless to move around. It feels planted at stops and low speeds, making it surprisingly manageable for even the smallest of riders. Compare that to something like sport bikes, where even if they weigh 150 pounds less than the Scout, the center of gravity is much higher. Combine that with a taller seat, a shallow steering sweep, and clip-on handlebars, it can feel way more unstable if you're stopped or moving around slowly. Adventure bikes are another good example. GS owners will always tell you how effortless it is to ride their 600-pound spaceships with 36-inch seat heights. The low center of gravity and a lot more natural ergonomics do the heavy lifting, pun intended. The smaller GSs, BMW 750 and 850 GS models, are commonly sought after by short riders because of the option for factory lowered suspension and low seat. Since we're on the topic, it's worth discussing how ergonomics can make or break a short rider's experience on a motorcycle, regardless of all the other factors we've discussed so far. At this point, we've talked about seat height, width, weight, and the center of gravity, but all of that still gets filtered through one last thing: how the bike actually fits you. If you've got a smaller inseam, there's a good chance you also have smaller arms. It's pretty rare to find people with a short inseam and really long arms. They're probably already competing at the deadlift competitions around the world if that were to be the case. Two riders could have the exact same height yet have totally different experiences sitting on a motorcycle. One may feel comfortable and in control, while the other feels really stretched out and cramped and limited in movement. These ergonomic considerations can affect your confidence just as much as seat height. The reach to the handlebar, the position of the foot pegs, the shape of the seat, they all play a role in how easy a bike is to manage. Kawasaki acknowledged this with their ErgoFit system that allows you to adjust the position of the seat, handlebar, and foot controls. And this system is found on the Vulcan S, which is not a motorcycle that I personally really enjoy, but I think it's a neat option to fine-tune ergonomics. And honestly, I'm surprised this isn't more commonplace across the industry. Imagine buying a car and not being able to move the seat. It'd be crazy. If the motorcycle you ride fits you properly, everything else will work easily in your favor. Now, the last thing we need to talk about is where the limits of seat height and weight actually are, because every motorcycle is going to be better or worse in certain ways. A BMW GS might be super tall and pretty heavy, but it's still surprisingly easy to ride because of its layout and center of gravity. On the flip side, a massive touring bike like a Harley Bagger, despite its low seat height, can be a challenge if you're a shorter rider, particularly in slow speeds. Now, obviously, if you're a new rider, you're probably not choosing between a GS and a Bagger, but stick with me for the example. A Harley-Davidson Bagger can sit below 27 inches with a rider on it, which sounds perfect, but they also weigh close to 900 pounds. And no matter how low the center of gravity is, 900 pounds is a lot of motorcycle to move around. And it's not just the weight. These bikes are wide. The seat is wide, the floorboards push your feet outwards, and now you're dealing with an even wider stance just to get your feet on the ground. Having both feet down doesn't help much if you're at the absolute limit of your reach. That's why a bike can feel great when you sit on it, but it actually is completely different once you start riding and maneuvering it. So, while low seat heights can make certain bikes accessible, it's not a guarantee. And once you start factoring in weight and width, that's where things start to get difficult very quickly. Now look, there isn't just one perfect bike for short riders. It's a combination of things working in your favor. Seat height, weight, width, ergonomics. You get enough of these right and suddenly a bike starts to feel a lot more manageable. And even if you don't, you can always tweak them. You can do lower seats, suspension modifications, even though I'll be honest, I don't really recommend doing lowering suspension for a variety of reasons. You can get aftermarket handlebars, foot pegs, whatever it takes. Then as your skill improves, the list of motorcycles that you can't ride get a lot shorter or maybe disappears entirely. And your best bet for right now is to just sit on as many bikes as possible, because you might be surprised at the one that fits you best. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of today's video. I truly do appreciate it. I will catch you on the next one. See you later. Fact: a buttload is a real unit of 126 gallons. Do with that knowledge what you will. Goodbye.